Hello,
And welcome.
my name's Matthew.
And I'm Keith.
Welcome to Dookie Shorts. Is this
Hello.
working?
Can
Are
you
we,
hear
are we
me?
good? It looks like we're good. I think we're good.
Can you guys tell us if you can hear us?
I mean, that'd be helpful.
All of you, one person,
Hi, binary.
anything binary?
Hello. So today we are wearing our lovely new merch, Dookie Shorts merch. You can't buy it yet. Sorry.
No.
Fuck you guys.
You know, you have to earn that right.
Right. But we're thinking down the road we may open up a store, let you guys purchase some of the sweet swag and maybe
Mugs.
some
Not this
sweet
one.
mugs.
This is just a mug I own.
Are you not gonna? You're not gonna do that on stream.
Maybe.
You need to.
Hi.
The most Keith thing that's ever that's
That's
been.
ever Keith. The most Keith thing. I'm sure if Keith other thing is a lot better.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's a t-shirt.
So some housekeeping. We had some issues with the audio last time. We believe we fixed most of it, but please, by all means, let us know. Give us some feedback if there are issues. I believe we fixed the crackling noise. I believe we fixed the audio peaking noise.
I never heard the crackling noise.
As I punch the microphone.
I never.
That probably is gonna be awful to edit out.
Oh yeah, smacking the microphone. I never heard the crackling noise. You were very loud.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and then if we got close to the mic, it was like, bam, like real loud.
Like super all up in it.
So hopefully, oh, thanks, Banner. I'm glad you like the shirts. Yeah.
Oh, the
hopefully
shirts look good. I
Yeah.
thought he meant I look good.
No, we can see you.
Wow. That was
That cut deep.
fair.
Do you need
That's
a?
fair.
Do you need to take a minute?
I need a moment.
You can go for a walk, and I'll chat with Binary.
There you go. Okay, so this week we're changing it up. We've done some interesting.
I made the mistake of putting Matthew in charge.
Yeah, that was a big mistake. We did the Hodag and then Rocky and Champ. That was our second episode. Both of those were sort of what do we call them? Cryptids.
Those are cryptids.
Yeah, so those are sort of supernaturally, sort of just sort of out of established science, so kind of outside of the
Fringe
norm. Yeah, there you
science,
go.
one might say.
That's a perfect way of putting that.
I'm gonna run out on money buying all these big words. I mean, this chat is always going to be kind of just things we want to talk about, and a lot of that's going to be paranormal, a lot of that's going to be fringe science. But we are going to spice it up because we also just are really interested in real science too, specifically Matthew, and so he decided.
I decided this week that we're going to talk about the nation's first and to date only nuclear accident involving fatalities. There we go. We're talking about the SL-1 disaster.
SL-1 disaster. Because if you don't put that dash in, some stuff doesn't show up on the internet.
Or you go to like weird porn.
I mean, not specifically weird porn, but just regular porn.
Just the good stuff.
Just use the dash. Just use the
Yeah,
dash.
trust us. Dash is good. So SL-1, what is SL-1? First of all, we're going to go with
What is SL-1? Dash 1.
SL-1. SL-1 stands for Stationary Low Power Reactor Number 1, and this was a Army experimental reactor with the entire purpose of powering off the grid remote radar sites. So the idea was to have a established base that can be up in, northern Canada or Alaska or something.
Arctic specifically is what they were looking for.
Yeah, exactly. But it's off the grid so that they don't have to import diesel fuel or whatever it is.
Yep.
And
Self-sufficient.
Exactly.
They could. It's enough to run an entire town.
Yeah, yeah. So the whole purpose was understanding how the reactor would work and what the individuals that are operating it would need to know, training, all that kind of stuff. That was the purpose of the SL-1, which was located in Idaho Falls, Idaho, at the Idaho National Laboratory.
So remote, but not as remote as one would hope for a nuclear disaster.
Correct.
I want to point out, let's take just a second. SL-1. The S stands for?
Stationary.
And the L stands for?
Low power reactor unit number 1.
Okay, so that, I mean, not one, you can take the one off it, but I feel like that S is not doing its part. I feel like the L is carrying a lot. And why isn't it not just SLPR-1?
Right.
Because if you're going to pick a word to be a major part of your abbreviation, I think power should be in there.
Yeah, maybe not low.
We're not like throwing like us and twos and thes. Okay, I understand not counting those, but these are all pretty important words like power and I don't know, reactor. React. It's like, I mean, it's pretty, stationary. I don't even need that one. They picked the two worst words, made those capitals, and just ignored power reactor. Now, maybe it's because they didn't want people to know the power reactor.
That could be. What I understood, because there's a lot in early Army lingo, there's a lot of these like 2-letter.
Like walkie-talkie?
Yes, exactly. Like, look, General, I'm walkie and talkie.
Yeah.
Fucking off topic there. So in early parlance for Army, it seems like there's a lot of these 2-letter and a number abbreviation systems. So
that's fair, but
it seems like they just
I'm thinking it
forced
should be
in.
PR1 if we're going to go with
Power Reactor 1.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that seem to make more sense than stationary low 1?
Yes, 100%.
I just want to, it's been bugging me all week.
Yeah.
So now you know.
I'm
sure you expected me to go off on that tangent.
I did.
You feel free to take your 14 pages of notes. So Matthew decided that he's going to take, I started this the first week, and I put together what I would only describe as a script for a play of like talking points. And
it included Matthew inserts witty comment.
Oh yeah, but it was very much like if you were writing a play, which I've of course also never done, but he learned nothing from that. So I came back the next week with the Rocky and Champ, and I had like 2 pieces of paper with some bullet points.
No, you had a laptop.
Oh yeah, I had a laptop, which was only 2 pages.
I had no idea what you had on the laptop.
Oh, that's true. But it was still just like notes. The only real issue is I couldn't print it. Now I can print things from here. Couldn't print things, so I just popped open the laptop and called it a day. He's got like...
It's 4 pages.
Double-sided.
It's not double-sided. It is single-spaced.
It feels double-sided. It's single-spaced. Look at how small the writing is on this thing.
Why do you have to throw me under the bus so aggressively?
My writing is the giant notes that I took. And I know it's not my week, but like, are you even going to be looking at me?
My hope is that I will, on occasion, look at you
up.
or...
It's going to be like, stationary, low power, reactor, 1.
Listen, we did learn the lesson from the first week, but unfortunately... I was planning on cutting this down into talking
That's
talking
right.
points.
These were your notes to start with that you were then going to make talking points, and you're like, no, I'm going to tear down a shed instead.
Yeah, today ended up being a fucking beautiful day.
It was gorgeous.
It was, mid-70s, and was it 2 days ago? It was in the 30s.
Yeah, and as much as we love all of you,
Yeah.
we like being outside more.
Right. We had shit to do.
Yeah, so
So that's my cop out. Call it what you want, but
it is what it is.
it is what it is. There will be, on occasion, you may see me glance to my notes, and by glance, I mean stare at them.
I might as well throw out that FYI. Binary had to leave for a minute because he had to look up what actually came up. If you don't use the dash in the SR1, he's going to be sorely disappointed.
Don't look up SR1's probably fun.
Yeah, check SR1 too. Sorry, Binary, I didn't mean to ruin your day. It's not as exciting as we made it out to
No,
be.
it really isn't. But it's
You just don't get everything.
Yeah, it's just definitely not the correct thing. Search phrase.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. What is power generation?
Oh, wow, that's where we're
This
starting?
is. We're gonna go like
We're
from
digging
the
in.
top.
For those of you that don't know what power generation is, go for it. What is power generation, Matthew?
Okay. Power generation is where you use heat to transfer water into steam, and the steam runs a turbine. The turbine powers a generator, and out comes lovely electricity.
So like in Back to the Future 3?
Yeah, basically exactly like that.
See, and you said you couldn't learn things from the movies. Thanks, Doc.
Okay, we're going to advance a little bit in complexity to nuclear power
I don't
generation.
know, that thing traveled through time.
That's fair.
I feel like that's further advanced.
Was that the one with Mr. Fusion
Yes.
on the back of the DeLorean?
Yeah.
Is that, am I
And
thinking
that's
of it right?
after they come back
Gotcha.
to the Mr. Fusion. I mean,
That'd be fucking sweet. I want that.
yeah, no, I'm talking about the train that turns in to a time machine at the end.
I'm not on the same page then.
We'll watch that later.
Okay, that's we'll have homework. Okay, so we know what power generation is. Now, nuclear power generation, the only difference is instead of using coal or
Diesel or whatever.
or natural gas or whatever it is, you're using uranium or plutonium or any fissile material.
Just like Back to the Future.
Yes.
Plutonium.
Listen, I also have to put in a disclaimer. I'm not a scientist. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about in general. I'm just sort of riffing.
But if you need information about Back to the Future, you've come to the right place.
Yes, correct. And hopefully we will continue to get distracted by that. That's my hope. So that's nuclear power. We use any kind of radioactive material to boil the water into steam. Otherwise, it's exactly the same.
Yes. You get the same reaction, the same finished product.
Right.
It's just that it's self-sufficient because it's not going to run out of energy. We're not going to run out of materials. We don't have to keep bringing materials to the unit.
Right. The density of the uranium fuel is so much more than coal or natural gas or anything else.
Literally anything.
So it's just a very useful material for that. Obviously, there are downsides, such as three-eyed fishes in the lake next to the Springfield.
So, I mean, that's just more fish.
Well, it's the same
that a
amount of
downside?
it's the same amount of fish. It's just
I mean,
it has three
if you
eyes.
see Total Recall, you also get 3 boobs.
Okay, that's
Just saying, there's not all downsides.
3 boobies is. I'm on board with that one.
I've only got 2 hands.
Well, you got your mouth.
Okay, fair. You fixed all the problems in my argument.
I've fixed the problem.
Now there's only upsides to nuclear pollution.
Yep, exactly.
Thanks.
Totally
Done.
on board. And then finally, of this sort of like point of power is for a nuclear power plant, engineers typically they'll use what's called a control rod, which is sort of
It's a metal rod.
well, it's also got material that absorbs the free neutrons in the reaction. So you put the rod in, the reaction stops. That's the kind of, I mean, it's much more complicated than that in practice,
And
but
there's
that's
usually
the
several rods.
right.
I think 9 in this case. Am I remembering
there
that
are
correctly?
there were 9 in the SL-1, but only 1 is important for the conversation that we're having.
Okay.
So yeah, when the rods go in, it slows and stops the reaction. When they come out, the reaction increases.
Speeds up.
Yep. We're going to go to the slides here.
Hey, we're going to do a real good job of explaining this. This is a map of part of the United States, specifically
Northwest.
the Northwest over Idaho. I can't read it from here.
Yes, I mean that does include Idaho.
And other areas.
So on the left of the map, you got Washington, Oregon, and then directly adjacent to that, you've got the great state of Idaho.
I think you're using the word great loosely, but go ahead.
In the southeast corner of Idaho, there is Idaho Falls, Idaho, which is a fairly populous town. It's right on the Snake River in Idaho. But just outside, about 50 miles outside of Idaho Falls, is the Idaho National Laboratory. On the map, we've sort of
Marked.
got the 2 pins for Idaho Falls and then the reactor location.
They're not terribly far apart from each other.
No.
At least not on this map.
Right. They are about 50 miles. So it's
In
that's
person,
an
it
hour
would take
drive or
a
something
little
like
longer,
that.
but yeah. For a nuclear problem, it doesn't seem like it's far enough away.
I would agree with that assessment. It's in the high desert of Idaho. So I didn't know anything about Idaho before I started looking into this, but the majority of Idaho is basically a cold desert. It's right at the foothills of mountains, and it's super flat, but there's just mountains in the distance. Kind of cool looking, actually.
Nice.
The Idaho National Laboratory, is one of 17 U.S. Department of Energy national labs focused on federally funded research and development. So what that means is...
Cool.
Listen, you little shit. You don't have to make this more difficult.
I'm trying to make it more difficult.
I understand. It's more entertaining when I struggle and I'm squirming in my seat.
You've got great notes.
They're fucking fantastic
amazing.
notes. We'll make these available to you guys after the fact if you are...
Real bored.
like beyond bored. If you just want to like...
Toilet sitting bored.
Yeah, or if you just want to laugh at
that's
my exuberance.
You use multiple kinds of
Bullet
little
points.
bullet points
Yep,
there.
absolutely.
3 colors. I like it.
They're very nice.
They're very
notes.
good.
You could turn this into a research project real easy in college.
Yeah, if anyone's looking for a college research
I got
paper
you,
or
fam.
maybe a senior thesis project,
Thesis.
you can.
I don't know about a thesis, but
It's a start. It's a start.
that's fair. That's fair. Okay, we're gonna continue. The Idaho National Laboratory is 890 square mile complex in the high desert of eastern Idaho, and it's about 40 miles west of Idaho Falls.
Idaho Falls.
There are about 5,000 engineers and technicians that work at the Idaho National Laboratory.
On the
it's a-
laboratory? Okay.
so it's a
that's a
pretty-
big place.
Yeah, it's a
on
pretty
its own.
sizable location. In fact, we have.
This is what I thought was cool. So I'll just enter. I know you'll give us a
No,
lot more information, but just from the research I did, which was barely any, when you look at the photos of the disaster, it's in the ground. So you think of maybe like nuclear silos where they have nuclear missiles, and they're always
Missiles.
like, I was gonna say ballistic, and that's not right, so I just switched it back to missiles.
That is correct.
Fucking almost right. Anyways, they're in the ground. Like everything's like it's
Barely.
500 feet in the ground or 1,000 feet in the ground or whatever. So when I looked at these photos and they're working on these rods, which I think we'll see later in this, they're in the ground and they're like pulling them out. But then when you do research, you realize that this cylinder that you're looking at is where it is.
Yeah.
And instead of being in the ground, it's just in the bottom half of it. And then the people that work in there and do all the work are actually in the top half. Right. So there's a circular stairwell that goes from the ground up to the halfway point, which becomes the ground floor for them. So it's a really unique design because that just goes back to like this whole thing could just be lifted off and gone wherever and set down. It's not dug into the ground. Right. It literally can just be placed anywhere, which is why it's so like interesting and has so many, really good possible uses.
Theoretical applications.
Absolutely.
You could see it being used at all sorts of locations.
And then like the building next to it is just whatever. It's like offices and
it's
storage.
just, that's where they do the
need
monitoring
that.
and all
like
that.
That's
kind of
not necessary. If they were out in the middle of nowhere, they can work
testing
out of
facilities
this
and
thing.
stuff.
Yeah, it's because this is a test. It's a learning.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyways, that was I thought that was really cool. That was like that's it. It's just that thing. I could stick that on the back of a truck and drive off.
So we didn't explicitly say it, but this is a picture of the SL-1 reactor and its support building, just from the time. So this is from 19.
This is not here now.
Right, correct.
The ground's there.
That's fair. The bushes might still be there.
Those bushes aren't. There might be new bushes.
The bushes might have 3 eyes also.
I don't question anything.
It's possible. It's possible. It's one of the kind of ironies in the whole process was that you can do that on screen.
It's none of their business what I'm drinking.
Fair enough. The building, they did it on accident, but the building ended up acting kind of like a containment vessel for all of the radioactive particles. So the shell of the building is 1/4-inch plate steel that's just sort of wraps around the entire building, and then the basement level was aggregate and sort of it was really designed just to keep everything where it was supposed to be and steady. But
it's supposed to be like heavy duty because the whole point is you should just be able to set this thing down wherever, and it should not be top heavy. It's designed to be super heavy. Right. It's got a really thick base.
Call it ballast or something, just to keep it in place.
It's designed to not move around high winds.
Right.
You don't have to. They don't know what kind of ground they're going to attach to. They want to just set down and not have to worry about it. Will they try to do other things depending on the environment? Probably, but they wanted to just be able to like go, boom, this is where it's at. It's not going to go anywhere unless something crazy happens. Because, again, it's got a nuclear reactor in it.
Right. And Keith actually wrote down, and maybe he'd be willing to share with us, some of the criteria for the facility itself.
So, I feel like this is part of why they ended up having a lot of problems in the long run is because they were limited to the size on everything. So, everything had to be, like, it's 2.2 by 2.7 by 6 meters. So, it's like 19 and a half feet. And it can't be heavier than 9.1 kilograms. So that's per box, though. Like it's not like the whole thing, but like that's what they said.
Why did you use?
That's the way it was
weird
given
units
to me. I don't know. These are government units.
Can you explain to us what that actually is?
I can't.
Can you?
It's boxes.
Is it bigger than a bread box?
It's bigger than a bread box.
Okay.
It's 19 0.6, I think, square feet per container is what they
Yeah,
allow to have.
I remember reading. I think it was 20 feet long was the maximum length dimension, and then it was like 10 feet or 6 feet or something,
Yeah.
whatever it was, square from there.
And because it has to be airlifted,
Right.
so they're super limited on weight.
Right.
And so that limits the things they can use inside it. So that's really where I think they got a little cheap on materials because they had to limit what could go instead of spending more time figuring out like, yeah, well, this is super dangerous. We should do this differently. They're like, yeah, but it fits in the box.
Right.
So, and that makes more sense to me military wise. Like, fits in the box, send it.
Yeah. There's actually pictures of some, call it next generations of this technology where they were putting it on the back of a like a military convoy truck.
Yeah.
And they were seeing how they could make it
It's
as
Jenga.
small as possible.
It's Jenga.
Yeah. And
Like-
it's like,
This should not be the determining factor. Let's just figure out what we need and then figure out how to move it. Like, I understand keeping it realistic. Hey, if we're thinking about this, just remember, hey, we got to move this somewhere. So if there's an option, let's make it smaller or let's make it lighter. But like, don't make it so like, yeah, it'd be way safer if we had this, but it won't fit real easy. So let's just do it this way. And that's what they were doing. But now I like to think that, yes, while they're paying attention to that, it's still not going to fall on the safety fact. Like, it still needs to make sure it works properly.
you really got to like wonder though, the thought process, it sort of makes sense for the Navy in a submarine or in an aircraft carrier that like by design, these things are not meant to be, well, I mean, I guess an aircraft carrier is meant to be the focus of the enemy frustration, but it's very well defended.
Yeah.
Versus these,
Little,
back of a truck
easy to find.
in the middle of,
Yeah,
Vietnam is like, maybe we shouldn't have something quite so, flimsy
Yeah, exactly.
driving around with our nuclear.
Yeah, you know what? If we got to take 2 airdrops
Yeah.
to get it out there, then let's do
I
that.
don't think you want to be airdropping.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's got parachutes on it. Add an extra parachute. Slow the descent.
I think maybe you just gave the military an idea that I'm not
That
comfortable
they
with.
shouldn't have. Holy shit, we have all kinds of parachutes. We could just add like 3 on here.
It's fantastic.
Send me a check.
You want royalties from the
Want
army?
royalties from the army.
I don't think they do it that way.
No, I'm sure they don't.
So those are sort of the physical characteristics of what they were trying to achieve. They wanted to airlift it.
Yeah.
They wanted to be able to move it easily and assemble it easily on location in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Well, and just to think how impressive these new ones will probably be. That old shitty one we're talking about was designed to run a medium-sized city. So like that had plenty of power. So I can't imagine what they could do nowadays
Right.
with something the same size or similar sized.
Yeah, and I mean, we also are talking about military installations, like super powerful radars that I'm sure, draw huge amounts of power in the grand
absolutely.
scheme of things. I
Yeah.
mean, we're not talking about a fluorescent light in the hallway.
No.
We're talking some serious military.
Solar's for.
Exactly.
That'll work sometimes.
On a pretty day like today was. So, did you want to talk about anything before we go to the disaster itself?
No,
Do
I
you
got
wanna-
information about the disaster and after the disaster more than the disaster itself. I mean, I have the gist of it, but let's let you keep rocking on that with your thesis.
Hopefully, nobody can hear me moving.
All the papers around.
paper around,
I have so
just-
many papers in front of me right now. I have what was one sheet of paper that then when got printed out here became 3 sheets
I've
of
made
paper.
it big for your old ass
I
eyes.
am old. That's fair. I appreciate that. And then I have his 4 small because he didn't make his pages any bigger because there'd be 14 of them.
Correct. No, there was a strategic reasoning behind the size of the paper.
So yeah. So you feel free to let us know a little bit about the disaster itself.
So just 16 years after the first atomic weapons were used in combat, on January 3rd, 1961. This is immediately following the Christmas and New Year's holidays, where the reactor itself was taken offline. They did some preventative maintenance before they left for the holidays. It was kind of in a cold
Yeah,
situation,
it was turned
completely
off
shut
basically.
down. Yeah,
I want to point something out.
Yeah.
How long had it been running at that point in time?
3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Just under 3 years.
Yeah,
at that point.
yeah. So how long was it designed to run?
Less than that.
3 years. It was designed to run for 3 years. Why are we starting this thing back up? That's
Right.
my first question.
Right. It was definitely at the end of its design parameters.
Yeah.
Especially for it being a research facility. Like,
Yeah.
This is, they were doing things. They were pushing it to its limits. They were like trying to figure out what the parameters
Which I
were.
appreciate. I mean, that's what you'd rather know now than when you set up a medium-sized city in the middle of the Arctic. I mean, I get it, but also, like, you designed it to last 3 years, and you've made more. This isn't the only one.
Right.
Like, move on.
Right.
Shut it down. Let's take it apart and learn some stuff. What happened? Did it start degrading on the inside? Like, let's do that kind of research
That's
on it.
foreshadowing.
But no, that's not what they're doing.
Instead, they just
They're just like, yeah, let's shake it up a little bit.
they just said fuck it and decided to go turn it back on.
They're like, Warren's going wild.
So they were trying to restart the reactor after the winter holidays. One of the standard maintenance protocols required them to physically manipulate the main rod number 9, in the center of the reactor, and they'd have to physically pull it out of the by hand.
Yeah,
somebody
like
had
a guy's
to
going to reach in and grab it,
pull
lift
the
it.
reactor. The control rod out of the reactor to hook it onto the hydraulic mechanism that actually runs it.
Yeah, because basically this thing goes up and down pretty regularly. The whole point is that, you know, if it's getting too much power, it lowers the rod so that it dismisses some of that power. And if it needs to build energy, they pull the rod up so it starts the reaction. So it's a pretty fine-tuned thing. You think, oh, it's going up and down, up and down. The important thing is how much it goes up and down and how quickly it goes up and down. So it's something a human should never be touching. Yeah. Now, I get this is the 30s and we don't have the kind of technology we have today to do that, but they did.
The 60s are not the 30s.
Or 30s. I'm sorry. The 60s. I was thinking of the Rocky one.
Yes, right, yeah.
Yeah, the 60s.
Timelines
They had engines and they had things, and they did have something to do this. But they had a fatal flaw of saying, we're going to not use that all the time. We're going to have a guy just do this really intricate, no mistakes allowed thing on a semi-regular basis.
So just to like drive it home, the normal day-to-day operation when it's running correctly, the guys aren't physically manipulating the rods. It's being pulled up and down by hydraulic pistons that are...
Which, let me say this, that scares the hell out of me too. I don't know if anybody out there has ever used things that use hydraulics, but those fail a lot.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, years ago, I drove a forklift on a regular basis, and as soon as that thing fails, and one, it's messy as hell because that shit sprays everywhere because it's under pressure, but also the thing it's controlling simply drops. So I'm amazed it didn't blow up day 3.
It just simply drops and turns off the reaction, right?
I don't think that's how this works.
I mean, in this case, that is how that would work. But,
Okay,
but that's not
technically.
necessarily...
It could also go the other way. It depends on how the hydraulics are set up. Now, I would like to think they were smart enough to do it that way, but after everything I'm reading, I don't know that they were. That thing might have fucking rocked through the roof. I don't know. I put no faith in the gentleman taking care of this thing.
Apparently, our friend Keith does not trust 1960s Army technicians.
Sure, the 1961s were the problems.
Not today.
Not today.
Government man
that are listening.
We are good.
We appreciate you're the only ones
boys.
here. And binary, who also might be a government man. I'm not 100% sure binary.
It's binary and the NSA are listening to us. That's about it at the moment. So at 9 p.m. on January 3rd, this is another thing to kind of note. This thing was running once they started up, it's running 24/7. So there's 3 shifts of technicians and supervisors that are trying to operate the
overlapping.
Correct.
So
and
it's not it's not noon on a Wednesday.
Right. It had already been delayed. The first shift wasn't able to get it started up, so the second shift, the evening folks were going through the stages of getting it turned back on and up and running. So at 9 p.m., the control rod was suddenly removed too far, which caused the reactor to go from standby idle power to prompt critical instantaneously.
Yeah. No delay.
4 nanoseconds is what it was, which is
nuts.
for all intents and purposes, that's instantaneously. I mean, that's
And
it's
from what
measurable, but it's
from
not.
what I read, and there's a lot of different places that they didn't necessarily know that.
Right.
They knew that there would be a problem,
Right.
but they didn't realize that it was an instantaneous explosion.
Right.
So part of that maybe is because they didn't. Nobody know. Maybe
This
nobody
is
knew that.
this is absolutely a design flaw.
Yeah. Exactly.
And at the end of the conversation during our lessons learned conversation, we'll see
we'll dig
why
into
that this or what we learned from this particular incident.
Yeah.
So just to sort of touch base on some of the words that I used, I said it went prompt critical, and that's the exponential growth in a nuclear fission chain reaction that can occur by the release of neutrons from the decay of the fuel alone. So just the fuel in the reactor is enough to cause it to go out of control and explode.
Yeah. If it's not being controlled. So
Right.
in other words, it's a big bada boom.
A big bada boom on accident, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe.
Well, that's actually an interesting point. I mean,
We'll get into
maybe we'll talk about
We'll
that
get
a
into
little
that,
later. So the effect of prompt criticality is what nuclear bombs are designed around.
to do on purpose.
That is how a nuclear bomb explodes.
Yeah.
It
They
goes
they make it
Right.
explode on purpose.
Right.
We're trying not to do it here.
Correct.
Maybe.
correct. Exactly.
Maybe.
And with the exception of research and experimental reactors, there are only 3 events in the history of nuclear power that are linked to a reactor going prompt critical and causing an explosion.
And those would be?
Chernobyl, reactor number 4. So that's what everybody thinks of when they think nuclear disaster, Chernobyl. That's sort of the one that comes to mind.
Yep.
The Soviet submarine K-431, which was in the 80s, they were refueling the reactor of a nuclear Soviet submarine, and they mishandled the fuel and put too much in at a time, and
Yeah. Didn't keep up to the
it went bada boom.
big bada boom.
That one, surprisingly, or luckily, I guess, there were only 10 fatalities with that particular event, which
is impressive
for
considering
sort
you're
of a
talking
nuclear
about
bomb,
a
it's like,
nuclear
yeah.
bomb in a sub, which you would think would have,
yeah,
I don't know how many people in a sub. It's a fucking lot.
right. Well, I mean, it was docked,
It was docked and refueling, so
Yeah,
it probably
exactly.
But there had to be people working
Right.
to do this.
at least 10 of them.
apparently.
And then finally, the SL-1. So this is the only time
In the U.S.
in U.S. history
Yeah.
where a reactor went prompt critical and caused an
An
explosion.
explosion. Yeah.
There are countless fatalities. Well, I mean, that's overselling it. There are many fatalities
maybe not
at nuclear facilities that are unrelated
To an explosion.
the actual nuclear power generation. A lot of them are unplanned steam releases or
Yeah.
mechanical issues like at the site where something goes wrong that is caused by the power generation, the nuclear power generation, but
Yeah.
is not necessarily related to the
An
reactor
a
fuel
reactor
itself.
exploding
Right.
and killing a bunch of people.
Exactly.
Or 3.
So I just want to have that caveat because this is billed as the only nuclear accident.
But it's
that
not the
has-
only death in the United States. It's just the
Correct.
only nuclear explosion
Right. In this very specific way.
that was done on accident.
So back to the incident itself. The heat from the reactor caused much of the water supply in the reactor to instantly vaporize, causing a 500 psi shock wave that lifted the entire assembly off the ground.
Yeah, everything jolted upward. It ripped,
9 feet.
It ripped a part of the top of the building off.
So there's a gantry crane that they use to. This is for actually refueling it. So they'd pull out the actual fuel rods, fuel cells themselves. And so the gantry crane is what ended up stopping the upward momentum of the reactor vessel itself.
Oh, okay.
So it jumped up 9 feet and impacted the crane. And the crane is the only thing that stopped it from going. I think they said it was going to go like 15, 20 feet in the air.
Oh, wow.
So
Which helped contain everything in the building, which
exactly.
again is one of those lucky happenstance to the design of the building. They didn't design the building for the crane to stop an explosion, but it helped keep everything contained to inside the building.
yeah, if the reactor itself had exited the effective containment of the building, it would have been a much worse
Bigger.
disaster.
Yeah.
You know, with radioactive contamination going
Yep.
in the air,
Air,
like,
animals,
all over the
like,
place.
yeah,
It would have
wind.
been a real bad,
Yeah.
real bad time.
Yeah, and that's one of those things they did learn something from this failure.
Yeah, no, they absolutely. This is one of those lessons learned. I mean, for one disaster and 3 lives, they learned a lot
Yeah,
from
it's
this.
probably saved many
Yeah.
lives over and pushed us further
Right.
scientifically and in our mechanics and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reactor vessel itself, the thing that contained the fuel and the control rods, is 26,000 pounds, and that thing jumped 9 feet into the air.
Wow. Instantaneously.
Yeah,
It didn't build up steam over hours. It didn't it just
Right.
was like
I'm done.
lift, explosion, shoot 9 feet in the air, would have shot 20 some feet in the air. That's so much. I mean, but again,
The
it's
force
so
of
much
that.
power,
Yeah.
and that's why they're using it.
Right, exactly.
So
Yeah, you can sort of see the
it's just we were using all of it at once.
unintentionally. The entire explosive event only took 2 seconds. So the entire event of, triggering the water vaporization, which when you think of how long it takes to boil water,
Yeah.
the fact that it goes from not cold, but like room temperature water to vaporized that fast
Yeah.
in
It's
2
a
seconds.
nuclear explosion.
It's
it's
fucking
instantaneous.
wild.
It's crazy, and it's really well because it's in such a contained amount of space too,
Right.
that it makes me think of like if you see like a torpedo explode underwater almost,
Yeah,
like
the-
where it's just like this, but super contained.
Yeah.
That's in my head. That's the way I see this. Like everything inside
Probably
that
a
building
really
is
good analogy
fucked.
too.
Like it's just thrown around inside this thing, and don't forget there's people in there.
Yes. And that's where we're going to. There were 3 operators, a supervisor, a technician that was responsible for the operation of the reactor itself, and then a trainee. So there were 3 guys in the building itself.
In that whole silver building that we see, which we actually still have up there.
Oh, we still have it up there.
So inside that building, there was water. Would have
Well, I mean, it instantaneously vaporized.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's technically only
guess-
300 degrees, but
yeah. You would think they would have been burnt from head to toe, and I've never heard anybody say anything about burns.
yeah. No, the autopsies at the end, which I don't know if you're going to talk about that at all, but the autopsies at the end determined that all 3 of these guys died from physical impact trauma.
impact, yeah.
only.
It wasn't
This is the only thing that killed them.
Yeah.
Not the radiation. Not the
Is it because it wasn't
steam,
enough
not
time for the radiation? To kill them.
Exactly.
Like radiation is a terrible slow death,
Right.
which FYI they all knew. Like they had known about it. They knew somebody in the U.S. that had died of radiation poisoning. It took like over a month for him to die, and it was because those were scientists that were doing tests in facilities. It wasn't an explosion. It was just I think that was called the Devil's Ball or something. We might talk about that.
I know what, because the doctor that did the autopsy also did the autopsy on the gentleman that you're talking about.
and he was a
but I don't
scientist.
remember the specifics on that
I
one.
think it's called the Devil's Tear or the Devil's Ball, and basically it was just a solid core of,
Oh, I remember.
and then they had a metal cap on it. And what they could do is they could lift the metal cap to do readings, and then they had to close it after a certain amount of time. But this guy was getting lazy, and he propped something underneath there, and it fell and it knocked the cap off, and he put it right back on instantly. But he had such a dose of radiation that he died within a month, and it was a terrible. Basically, his cells stopped working. He stopped regenerating cells. So he was totally fine when it happened, but as his cells died and they didn't regenerate, he basically just like dissolved and withered away. So
What
terrible.
a fucking awful way to die.
And part of these guys, what they went through for training was learning about that, because it had happened relatively recently to this happening, because that during that time is when they were learning. So anyways, they all knew this was a terrible thing. So anyways, Byron's killed instantly. Richard McKinley was actually alive, rolling around on the floor when the rescue, which was a fire department, I believe was the one that went there, and they did not know enough about this facility to be
That's
going
an
in first.
understatement.
They knew what the facility was, but they had no idea about radiation, really. They just went in.
They did have the proper radiation, like Geiger counters and stuff, to
They had the
determine
counters.
that there is a issue at this facility.
Yeah.
So they had already responded twice before that night.
Yeah, to false alarms.
False alarms that had nothing. They were
Because they were starting the facility up, so like stuff kept going off. Right. So this was their third time. Like, oh Jesus, all right.
So they just assumed they were rolling up.
But they still didn't have the right worry level. Like,
correct.
They did not worry. They knew that it was a thing, but it's not like now where we know that. Like,
my only pushback is going to be that nobody really.
That's fair.
To the extent required,
the military knew.
Just the simple design of this reactor
tells me that
people did not understand the danger that they were regularly putting themselves in.
That being said, like the military shows up directly after that, and they do know they do have the proper protocol. So like the information existed.
Right. It's just
I don't think anybody thought that this was going to happen, but like they definitely did not train the local fire department rescue to the extent they should have been trained, because they should have known what the guys that came in from the military knew, because they were going to be the first ones on site. So even if all of the facilities in the world didn't know how to do it, this facility should have gone through training. Right. So anyway,
Idaho Falls National Laboratory, where they do research on nuclear physics, probably should know how to do this.
Had some, just a little.
Yeah, just a smidgen.
But anyways, he was still alive. Which one was that? That was...
So I actually had it backwards. Burns was the reactor operator.
Yep.
Legg was the shift supervisor. He was the one that was on the top of the top of the reactor.
Yeah, he's the one that got impaled.
Mm-hmm. And McKinley was the trainee.
McKinley was the one that was alive, and he was like rolling around, and they carried him out, and then they instantly, right as they were bringing him out, a nurse and another driver showed up, and they put them in the car, and they were trying to get out of there, and they were actually stopped by the military that had cut off the roads, because they knew what was going on and was actually responding, and they moved him to an ambulance, and her, because she also now has been trying to keep him alive in the back seat, and there's been a guy driving in the car, and they're not wearing anything. So
and they're all exposed.
They're all exposed. And he ended up passing away in the ambulance. He didn't make it either.
It's only 2 hours or 3 hours or something like that.
Yeah,
it didn't take long.
And again, because it wasn't because of radiation, it was because of impact. Like he just had been destroyed from that
internal
whole
bleeding, and I think it was a brain hemorrhage is what ended up killing him.
Yeah, he got
bleeding in the brain.
Everyone in this building got smoked.
Yeah.
And then the last guy, Richard Legg, is the guy who was handling the rod. And he was, like you were saying, he got impaled from the groin up through the shoulder into the ceiling.
Right.
And they actually had to go in 3 or 4 times before they found him. And what they did find out is when they started going in, they knew they couldn't go in for long periods of time, but didn't really know anything. When the military actually showed up, they said, you only have like 25 seconds or 20 seconds. So go in, see what you can, and get out. We're going to honk a horn after the 20 seconds, and you have to be out.
Very formal.
Primitive. Yeah, it's primitive, but that's what they did, and they just go in and out, and that's what they were doing when they brought out McKinley, who was still alive.
Yeah.
He actually probably stayed in slightly longer than he should have, but it was still pretty close. He grabbed, because they had already gone in and seen the 2 guys on the ground and knew where they were. So yeah, there's some other interesting tidbits, but I don't want to get into that
based on how the corpses ended up having to be buried.
Yes.
The gentleman was going to die from radiation.
None of them would have survived from radiation.
Right.
In fact, the people that went in had to be scrubbed on site. Right. They got checked. They had like hot spots on their arms or hot spots on their leg.
It was 370 something individuals that were involved in the overall rescue deconstruction. So it was 370 something individuals that technically were exposed to radiation for this entire event.
There's actually 790 that were exposed, 300 exposed directly, and 790 exposed at the facilities afterward because of testing and all that. So 790 total. I think 300 was the specific to the incident, and then 32 of them got certificates of
heroism.
Heroism, yeah. That's a tough one, heroism. 32 of them got awards for going in.
Yeah, for how they
handled it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was 790 people after, and that's everybody. Like they had to bring these bodies. They had to, I believe they had to take some of the bodies apart, and parts of the bodies had to get buried at the site.
Arms and certain body parts were severed from the bodies
Yep.
and had to be disposed of.
with all the other nuclear waste because they were way too high radiation.
Right.
But then I believe
There
some
was-
of them got sent back to the families, and I'm using quotes on that because the families never got them, but they were able to be buried in like lead-lined coffins,
That
which is nuts.
Which I wonder if you can. I would imagine their location is not discoverable.
Yeah, I would imagine, like that's why I say when they were sent back to the families, that's really just to know that they got a burial. They probably got a military burial,
Right.
And were with honors and things like
Right.
that. But it's not like the family ever got to see the bodies or anything like that.
So that sort of. I had some information about the how they used a modified stretcher to get the body out and the
Oh
location.
yeah,
of
so
the,
that is cool
one that
though.
was hanging,
So
yeah.
because they couldn't get the body from the ceiling out, they did bring in like basically a forklift style stretcher that was extremely long, and they basically cut him from the ceiling.
So they cut
he would
the
drop.
rod. They cut the rod that
sticking-
was impaling him into the ceiling. So they cut the rod itself so that his body and the rod
Would fall.
onto a modified stretcher that was reinforced to support the extra weight.
of the rod and the drop.
Right. And then that whole thing was just shoved in through the outside door
Yep.
on a crane
Long
gantry.
crane because they couldn't stand in there. They
Right.
could only go in there for 15, 20 seconds at a time. So yeah, they went in there, looked at it, saw what they needed, built this contraption, slid it through the door,
Right.
and then somebody had to go in there and cut it.
So they were going in for I think 30 to 60 seconds at a time, whatever that time was, and they would do a little bit of cutting
And then go back out.
and leave,
And go back in,
then
yeah.
do a little bit of cutting, leave.
Yeah.
And I remember reading how long it took, but I don't remember it. But it took a significant amount of time for them to do
Go
this.
back and forth. Well, yeah, it take
procedure.
20 seconds. Half of that time just getting in there and getting back out. So, like, how much cutting are you done? I don't know if anybody's used a Sawzall before, or like, and
they didn't have
they didn't
Sawzall.
have that. So, like, yeah, they're just
Right. Whatever they were using, it was probably slow and painful.
yeah, exactly. And so, and then I think on the screen here we've got the three gentlemen: McKinley, Byrons, and Leg. And this is the best picture on the internet of them, which is nuts. Like Matthew was asking, he's like, "Did you see any other better pictures?" I was like, "No, there's like no pictures of these people."
I would imagine like military records might have originals or something.
But like, why?
This
How
is
are
like
they
in
not
the newspaper?
Like, families haven't like.
Yeah.
It's nuts. It's crazy that there aren't better photos of these guys who are. I mean, yeah, it's like historic.
It's yeah.
And
Well,
they don't have a better than a grainy image that these look like they were their military like headshots, and then they were printed in a paper and somebody scanned them.
one of the wildest little factoids of this whole thing was that the newspapers that were reporting regularly about this event stopped talking about it less than 2 weeks after it
Yeah,
happened.
it was. I mean,
It was just a non-story.
to think that there isn't a cover up involved in a lot of this would be crazy. So speaking of cover ups, I'm gonna dig in. I'm sure you've got some more things that we can chat about, but I want to throw this little tidbit in. So about a month after the incident, obviously they're doing inquiries and they're trying to find out how it happened because nobody's in it. The stuff that we're telling about, nobody knew. Nobody knew that the guy pulled the rod out. You know what we didn't talk about? We didn't talk about how little the rod got pulled out.
Oh, that's right.
We should touch up. Let's touch base on that first. So what we discussed is the rod was taken out too far, which caused the explosion.
It was inches. I don't have the number.
I have the numbers.
But,
All right, so
okay.
there's a guy. He's holding this rod, and he has to yank it out and clip it onto the hydraulic system that does it. So he's standing up and he's pulling on this thing, and if there's any resistance, I don't know if anybody's like yanked on something, it's resisting. Like sometimes it gives, and that's what everybody thinks happens. So he had to move it 4 inches. He moved it 20 inches. Is what they said for the type of explosion, how much had to be 20 inches. So instead of going, he went, oh fuck, and now and 4 milliseconds later the building exploded. Like the guy standing next to him didn't even know he pulled it out too far before it exploded.
Right.
Like that's why it's like, how is a guy doing this? Like that's why a machine was handling it, but like they didn't have like an off switch before they hooked this thing up and turn it back on. Something. Maybe an extra rod to make sure that it doesn't have, they can move it up a fucking 3 feet and it doesn't matter. Anything at all. If they moved it out 5 inches, it still would have blown up. Maybe it would have blown up in 8 milliseconds. But like, how fucking accurate do you need a human to be? Like, humans aren't that accurate.
That's the wild
My
thing.
hands get all sweaty. Like, oh shit, if I move this thing 4.5 inches, we die. And I also don't know that they knew that. I think they knew that they had to be careful and that they had to be precise.
Right.
But I don't think they thought the building would explode in 4 milliseconds if he slipped. Yeah. I don't think, I would have thought they would be like, oh shit, hook it back up. Yeah. Oh man, that would have been close.
Yeah.
Whew, good thing we got that back on. No, you're dead.
Right.
You're dead.
100% not alive anymore.
That's like the
fact that any person is being asked to do this is
yes. It's crazy.
Fucking nutty.
Also, 3 years went by without it exploding. How'd that happen?
Right.
And I know, and again, they don't do it every day.
Right.
It probably is only during shutdowns, which they probably don't do. So maybe they had to do it 5 times.
This legitimately probably should have happened the first time.
It should have happened the first week.
Come on.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is that pole probably worked better the first week. But 3 years later, and again, this was designed to work for 3 years. So this stuff's all corroded. This is in
and there's actually the running theory is that it ended up getting the corrosion from being sitting in one spot for
the whole holiday weekend,
19 days or whatever it was. Sitting in one spot, unmanipulated at all, it corroded and stuck. And there was give to it. That's what they think, but it wouldn't actuate out of the container correctly. So he was struggling with it
and yanking on it harder to get it to break free. And then obviously if you need something to go 4 inches and you have resistance and it breaks free, it's going to go more than 4 inches. It's going to go through the roof apparently and to your shoulder. So yeah, that is the theory. There's other theories and that's what I'm going to talk about right now.
Excellent.
So there's a whole nother theory of this that's very interesting that involves a love triangle.
This is why, in my opinion, it was appropriate to have this conversation on Dookie Shorts. Because so far what I've talked about is just science and facts. It's fun.
It's cool.
Yeah, but this particular thing is where you go like, huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I want to point out, so like I said earlier, there was like, they were checking everything out. There were lots of people, they were looking into their family lives. They were looking into, how big was the explosion and, what do you think happened? So they did all that. So a month later, 2 weeks after they stopped talking about it in the newspaper, apparently, a gentleman at the Atomic Energy Commission named Leo Miazga, and I'm not saying that right, but it's Miazga.
Keith's notes are better than mine.
I don't know about that. I can barely read my notes.
Mine are more detailed, but his are, usable.
So he was the guy in charge of the, let's say, audit of the situation. And he came out that there was a love triangle and that this was a murder-suicide. So what was happening, and what we do know for a fact was happening, is that the John Barnes, well, we don't know this part, but the part we know is that just a couple hours before this happened, he was on the phone with his wife from the facility. They have records of that, and she was threatening to divorce him. So he's obviously, first off, not in agreement. Even if that's it, there's no love triangle. His wife wants to divorce him. Is this the guy we want pulling the rod out?
Right.
This dude who's super agitated.
Flustered and agitated.
He's flustered.
And
he's like,
thinking about work.
I'll pull the rod out. Fuck this. Let's do this. So, like, first off, have fucking Richard do it or something. He's the trainee. You apparently have a better chance with him.
Right.
But so we know he was having an issue with his wife. The issue, I believe, in what not only what this story is saying, but what this part might be true, he might have had an affair with a stripper. We don't know that for sure, but that's what they were leaning towards, and that's what other people here said. That's what actually Richard Legg was saying as well prior to that, which that started the whole thing with his wife, and that they.
So there was drama.
There was drama going on for sure. But the part we don't know is there's a possibility that Richard was sleeping with John's wife, and that Richard and John went to the strip clubs together, and then Richard is the one that made sure the wife found out that John slept with a stripper. So you've got all this stuff going on, and then you got Richard, who's just collateral damage, basically. He has nothing to do with this. He's not sleeping with anybody.
Poor guy. This is
which
training.
is sad. I mean,
we don't know that he wasn't sleeping with
he might have
anybody.
sleeping with somebody. He wasn't sleeping with anybody else's wife that we're aware of. Not with any of these two guys' wives, at least. I don't want to put too much on him. Maybe he was the man. I don't know. Maybe he was sleeping with everybody's wife, but his.
CB.
He was sleeping with everybody's wife but John's. Maybe. I don't know. But so anyways, that's the love triangle. Richard supposedly sleeping with John's wife, supposedly telling John's wife that John slept with a stripper, because basically John's a hothead,
Right.
and Richard is like a prankster guy.
Right, which this is all well established. There were a lot of back and forth and supervisory complaints and stuff like that.
Well, and then I think the other thing is and Richard just got promoted above John too. So there was all these things that were going on between these two. They had supposedly gotten into a fight over that holiday
Like a
weekend.
physical fight.
Like one guy punched the other guy in the face. So there was definitely shit going on. The wife was definitely talking about divorce. This all was happening over that holiday weekend while the facility was closed and that rod was being wedged in place over 19 days or whatever.
Yeah.
So the question is, and this is what Leo Miyazaga printed about the love triangle, is that he said that John decided he was going to kill them all and that he purposely yanked the rod out and killed everybody, which makes no sense. So I'll say I don't believe the love triangle thing. I think maybe it was happening, but I don't think he tried to plan to kill them all. Here's a couple of reasons why. He didn't know it was going to explode if he yanked the thing out. They didn't know that. They knew there would be a problem. They didn't know the building was going to explode and kill them all. They thought they'd have time to get out of the building. So that wouldn't bring a gun in and shoot him. I don't know. This isn't what you would do. They also all knew that the guy that died from the radiation poisoning died a horrible death that took a month plus time.
Right.
You wouldn't do that to yourself. Right. You'd shoot the guy, you shoot yourself or whatever.
Right. And
Pills or something.
why are you killing Richard?
Yeah, and then what'd Richard do to you?
Fucking innocent bystander.
So what it comes right down to is Leo was trying to cover their asses, I think, and make it look like it was human error.
The institution's ass.
Not his specific ass. And he wasn't trying to cover the guy's ass. He was trying to throw them under the bus.
They're
like
dead.
you did
Fuck
to
them.
me in the first fucking podcast we did.
Listen. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that.
Go back and listen.
Yeah. So that's the love triangle. It's John and Richard and John's wife, supposedly. We do know that John and his wife were having marital problems. We do know that John and Richard had personal problems because of just the fact that they were kind of both hotheads and pranksters and fucked with each other, but also the fact that one got promoted over the other one just recently over that time.
And just the physical altercations. Can you imagine being in a work environment where this is the kind of stuff going on, regardless of the fact that you're fucking operating a nuclear bomb?
Yeah, I feel like the stress levels are high enough. You don't need to be dealing with divorce. You don't need to be dealing with people getting promoted above you. You don't need to be dealing with somebody telling your wife that you're cheating on them, even whether you are or not, I guess. I don't know. Either way, don't say that, I guess. And I don't know. You're dealing with a fucking nuclear explosion possibility, even though if they didn't realize it was going to explode, or I still feel like they knew it could explode, but I don't think they thought it was going to be instantaneous. They were under the impression they could evacuate the building if there was a problem. Right.
There were procedures for emergency evacuations. There was this whole second stairwell for leaving the building. So, the thought process, I'm sure, for these guys was, if something goes wrong, we have the opportunity to leave, not 4 milliseconds and then the whole thing's gonzo.
So I got a question about this second exit. I did a bunch of research on this. I mean, not as much as you. I did some research on this.
4 pages.
Yeah. I did 1 page. It got made larger. I remember I watched a special on this a couple years ago, and there was this whole part about the military not letting the fire department in to get the bodies, and they went in through that back door without the military's permission.
So I know there was a concern when they were trying to do the body dropped onto the stretcher thing.
Stretcher, yep.
They were going to use the other door, but it was jammed and equipment wasn't put in front of it. So it was a useless door for the purpose of an emergency exit. Okay. But my understanding was that the equipment got jostled and moved and disrupted during the explosion, and that's what was blocking the door. So
Okay.
I think under like normal circumstances, it would be able
That
to
would
be
have been the way.
used as sort of like a secondary.
I can't, and I know, and I'm going off memory on this, and I couldn't find anything. I specifically did look for that because I remember watching a special on that, and they were talking about how like one of the guys was like, "We got to get these guys out," and maybe this was even before like they had gotten all the bodies out and stuff. Like, but I could have swore they went in through that way, and then they had to get decontaminated and all that kind of stuff. But I couldn't find anything about that. Maybe that was a story built around.
Yeah, and
because this one specifically has stories around it. Because no one, I don't care to this day, we've given you all these quote unquote facts about how it exploded. We don't really know. This is what they are pretty sure happened based on what the findings were afterward.
And you can find, so if you Google the SL-1 explosion, SL-1 explosion, you'll actually see pictures of a facility exploding. And that was a recreation using conventional explosives.
I kept seeing that and I was like, that's not real because nobody knew it was going to explode and they had cameras set up for it. And so that's what I think I'm thinking of when the roof was gone. I think that's the one I was thinking of in my head about the roof being missing. Yeah. Because I don't think the roof was missing on the original one.
So my understanding of that one is the recreation used too much conventional explosives and it was a wasted test. But there were pictures of it and it was billed as what it would have looked like. And it was just sort of a...
I mean, it's a learning experience is what they're going for.
Right. So yeah, that's sort of, there's a lot of kind of recreation study around this thing, but you're right that nobody knows specifically exactly what happened in there. This was before CCTV cameras with offsite storage, and like this wasn't a time where
if you didn't see it happen,
right, the facts are based on
evidence
that's like present after the fact.
Facts, I guess. There's
it's all circumstantial.
Yes, circumstantial. One of the other things we didn't, I think we maybe said this, but like, so the rods that was stuck, that we assume was stuck, because we think the rod was stuck. Right. He yanked on it, it went out too far, it exploded. There was 40 plus marked times of that happening.
Yes.
So how did not 19 of these places blow up? So 40 times these rods stuck and they didn't pull it out more than 4 inches.
Right.
But on the 41st time, so they knew it was a problem. They knew. They're like, these things are sticking all the time.
And there was, I don't have the...
40 times in 3 years.
Right. I don't have the specifics in front of me, but there was a congressional investigation of this whole thing. And the Congress at the time was interviewing the director of the facility of the Idaho National Laboratory. Mm-hmm. And his justification was that nobody at the facility for the SL-1 facility itself had told him that there were any sticking issues. Otherwise, he would have promptly shut it down. That's what he told under oath to Congress. And he
lied.
Well,
he lied.
I mean, it's entirely possible, but he fucking threw the manager, not the guy that died, but somebody that's still, well, might still be alive. I don't know. But the manager of the facility under the bus and said that guy didn't pass us up the chain correctly. And he's the reason that this whole thing happened. And like, so there's a lot of this fucking drama.
Seems like there's a lot of covering of asses. Yeah. From the guy I was talking about trying to cover the whole program because they didn't want to shut down the program, to this guy covering up saying, "Oh, it was the manager," and then it's like, well, yeah, we shut the facility down for a month, and like, the shit should stick, anyways.
Right.
Bring in a little fucking crank ratchet or something, and let's fucking just real slow crank this thing up.
A little WD-40.
Yeah, anything. I don't know. Do anything but yank on it. Just a manually, person yanking on it manually and going, oops, we dead.
So my last section here, well, I've got 2 sections left. The penultimate section.
Oh, shit. That's going to cost $5.
is consequences. So this is sort of the immediate kind of, you can pour more.
I'm thinking about it. You.
Okay.
Don't worry about me.
Fair. One of the main consequences of this SL-1 disaster was that the design concept in its entirety was going to be abandoned. We did talk about how the Army continued with other derivatives of the design, but the specific SL-1 design, the way that it was implemented, was abandoned completely.
Because there were a lot of good things about it.
Right. It did, however, help generate many safety standards that are in effect throughout the nuclear industry today.
Yeah, and that's where I'm like, so they abandoned it, but like they did use a lot of stuff from it. Like it wasn't like they just abandoned. They abandoned this,
right? This,
but not the stuff they got from it.
The specific construction style of this reactor, which we've talked about. You know,
there were a lot of pluses for it.
Well, and a lot of failures of the design. For one being the single rod being pulled out too far. That's the big takeaway from the industry for this whole thing.
More fucking rods. Like how hard is that?
Right. Well, and again, there were 9 rods.
Yeah, and one more.
All of the other rods were inserted.
Yeah.
This one gets pulled out too far, and suddenly, big bada boom.
Yeah. So have another rod in there, and you fucking yank that rod up and down all you want.
So this is called the one stuck rod criterion, and that's
sounds like something the military came up with.
And that's in effect throughout the nuclear industry today. And basically it means that all nuclear reactors are now designed so that a single control rod's removal will not permit a reactor to go prompt critical.
You know what? That's just good business.
Logical.
That's
that's super fucking duh. Maybe they should have fucking done that beforehand. But
how did you not think of that? How are they at the drawing board going, this guy, this human being who could have anything going on in his life is responsible for pulling this rod out specifically 4 inches exactly without it sticking, without it pulling out too far, without not pulling it out enough.
Right. That's what she said.
And yikes. And that's it. Like, that's just terrible. Where's the backup?
Right.
Where's the redundancy?
Right. And so that's...
You got 2 more guys there. Have one of them hold... Have each... All 3 of them can hold a pole. Like, let's do this. It could be a fun party.
I don't think we should encourage...
3 dudes holding poles? I wouldn't encourage that in public. Matthew is rubbing his hand. For those of you not watching, Matthew needs a minute. He's taking his time envisioning 3 guys holding poles. That's what we're trying to talk about here, is guys pulling poles.
I don't like where this conversation's... Like, we were doing so well.
It's 3 guys holding rods. Does that sound better? He doesn't think it sounds better.
No.
We need more than 1 rod in this room. That's what I'm saying. Listen,
so I'm looking
we need a backup rod. Does anybody out there got a backup rod?
I'm looking forward to the feedback on this particular episode. This is going to be, we're going places.
Oh, man.
The NSA guy is just going.
He's like, we need to take a day off after this. Find another guy with a rod. Save people's lives. Man.
Okay, so we talked
they
about...
need another goddamn rod. Across
Correct.
the board. 2 rods for everybody.
2 rods, 1 glass.
Don't look that up. Binary. Look that up. Let me know what happens.
Let us know what happens. So that was the big takeaway from the entire disaster is single rod being removed all the way from its sheath.
Stop.
It's bad.
Stop doing that.
Correct. So now that's not possible. Single control rod being removed from any reactor at any point will not cause a reactor to go prompt critical.
Yeah.
One of the other things that was really interesting about this is the documentation before. So like how to operate the reactor was like 6 pages. There was almost no meaningful step-by-step, checklists and all that kind of stuff for what these guys are meant to be doing.
Or what's going to happen if they don't do it.
Right. And so there was a lot of kind of procedural concerns, obviously, of, there was a lot of hands-on training, and there were people that knew how to operate and knew what was going on and all this stuff. They were competent individuals, but the documentation of what is supposed to be going on was basically non-existent.
Very weak. It's like an IKEA fucking shelving
right,
unit.
Just like pictures and arrows and
that don't point
insert
to anything.
rod A into gaps B, and there you go. Please don't clip that. So the documentation was expanded substantially, and there's a far more formal process now than there had been before, which this is another takeaway. We talked about it briefly, how the fire department, when they responded, had radiation measuring devices, but all of their devices pegged out to the maximum every
Yeah, so
time.
they weren't
they had
doing
no
anything.
idea.
They just knew there was
Right.
radiation.
They had no idea the risk that they were exposed to, or the significance of what was going on. So now people that are responding to radioactive, or have the possibility of responding to radioactive incidents, their measuring devices go way off the scale.
Yeah,
So
they know exactly
Right.
what they're getting into. They've got protection,
Right.
at least to some extent.
right, exactly,
Yeah,
or at least have an idea of what they're walking into.
yeah.
The team that was researching after the fact determined that the building itself, like we discussed, the physical structure of it, ended up acting an awful lot like a containment facility. This was completely by accident. They had no intention of doing it that way at the time when
Which
they were
why
building it.
not?
There was no such thing. Nobody
I guess they didn't
thought
really
about it.
know.
And that's actually talking
One of
about
the things they
Chernobyl.
learned. Yeah.
There was no containment facility, which is why Chernobyl was so
Such
bad.
a big deal. That makes sense.
So it wasn't a standard. Nobody
but also
knew
it
it was
taught
a
them
thing.
what could be used
Right.
to contain something, which is really good.
Yeah. And so they learned that lesson by accident. They didn't know they were testing for this outcome, but they took it away. And they, to their credit, to the people that were, doing the investigation, they were like, this
What
was a
can we
good
use?
thing,
Yeah.
and this actually saved a lot of
Will save a lot of lives.
lives.
Well, I know there's a Dr. John Zimbrick from the Colorado State University. He's a professor of emeritus. I don't know. But he's the department head. But basically, he works with, it's EMERI.
Emeritus.
Yeah. But he was one of the first people on site afterward. After they were cleaning up the site, you still couldn't go into it. And he actually went into the building. He's one of the first guys that went into the building to do readings to learn from it. And they were allowed to go in for 10 seconds. And then they had to be scrubbed down.
Just think about how much work you can actually accomplish
In 10 seconds. Well, so he was told a specific thing to go in and look at.
Each time.
Because they couldn't take photos.
Right.
So he went in.
Too much radioactive.
Too much
contamination.
radioactive. So his was actually, so when the place exploded, all these walls fell in the center, and the thing he needed to look at was on the other side of it. So he actually went in, ran, and jumped, slid across this thing, looked at it, slid back, and got out in time. But because he slid across the whole thing, he was super radioactive.
Like covered in.
Yeah, and he's still alive
dust and
today,
debris
and
and stuff.
but they had to scrub him down right away. But like he was one of the first guys, nuclear sciences. He was like one of the first guys to get a degree in it. It was brand new. They were trying to get these college students to go in and do it, and he was one of the first guys.
Fucking invented the.
They're the ones
whole-
they're the ones that took this information from this disaster and actually created something good to come out of it. Speaking of which, 22 people of those 790 received doses of 3 to 27 Roentgens
Rumpkins,
of full body exposure.
which is a lot.
It's a ton. And the one thing I couldn't find, and maybe you could, is how many people actually died due to this.
Nobody died as a response from, well,
All right.
make
So
sure-
three
there were-
people
there was a
died
three
from it
peop-
happening.
right. Nobody was determined to have died from exposure, but there were a significant increase in rates of cancer and all
so
sorts of stuff. So
I know
it's-
one gentleman died in 2008 of cancer resulting from the radiation he got on that. I don't have his name because
Well,
it's trying to find
right.
and trying to find proof, but that's what they said happened. He was the guy who was in charge of the first response team.
Yeah. This is one of those really difficult and the same sort of stuff happened with 3 Mile Island and with Chernobyl and with all sorts of stuff. There's these marked increases in the rates of cancer and childbirth abnormalities and all sorts of
which
like,
everyone knows
crazy
is
stuff.
happening, but no one will take
Right,
responsibility.
but nobody
or
wants
can
to
prove
pin
specifically.
it on the events themselves.
Exactly. One of the other guys was Egon Lamprick, who was still alive in 2009. I couldn't find any information about him after 2009. He was 74 years old. He could be dead from totally normal causes at this point in time. But he was also one of the original guys that ran in.
Right. So it's
And he said that He's the one that they did an interview and said, like, we were stupid to go into that building. And so many people have died since then that he thinks was from radiation. Again, they won't prove it. They won't pay anybody.
Right. The institutions, the government.
I did find a documentation from the government that's like 100 pages long about all incidents. I printed that out. Like, I just didn't bring it wasn't that long. It was long though. Yeah. But it was actually showing payouts for the amounts families got for being involved in nuclear incidents in the U.S. And it wasn't just explosion. It was like you were talking before. There's lots of nuclear incidents that cause death, and a lot of those are payouts that didn't actually go to court, or they're not saying they're responsible. Yeah, they're settlements, and they were only in like the $40,000 or $50,000 range on average. Like, which again on these older ones, that was a lot of money, but they didn't like they still are only like $40,000 or $50,000. So,
yeah, no, it's there's definitely some interesting. Probably not the right word to use there, but some wild. It really feels like the Wild Wild West in a lot of ways when it comes to how the institutions are held responsible.
Yeah, they're not. Right. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I understand it when it comes to like people that are in the military. I mean, you've taken some expected risks joining the military. Like, I see where they get away with it. I don't think it's right, but I kind of can understand that. I mean, you're putting your life in your hands anytime you go to war, to do anything. There's always a possibility. But if you're Bob and Susie and you have a house and you live down the road from what is thought to be a safe facility, and there's an explosion and stuff floats through the air, and now Susie's baby has 3 eyeballs, and then they're like, no, that's you normal. Guys just did freaky stuff, I guess. I don't know.
Sorry.
And nothing ever comes of it. That's bullshit. Like, it's obvious.
Yeah.
1 + 1 = 2 in a lot of these situations. And
it's obvious to everybody that's not
cutting a check.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. And to be fair, it's probably obvious to them too. It's just
they have
their job is to not spend money doing that stuff. So, which is kind of fucked up when you think about it.
Yes, it is.
So last we talked about was the reactor building acting like a modern containment facility. And so now all nuclear reactors in the West, this is still not the case for
everywhere,
all nuclear reactors everywhere.
Terrifying.
Right. But all nuclear reactors in the West and Western leaning governments, so like Japan has them and South Korea has them. But all of them have a modern containment facility. And this is like 10 feet of concrete, reinforced concrete thick with a layer of plate steel on the inside and on the outside typically.
Yeah, because they know that is something that repels.
Right. And these things are designed to take a direct impact from like a 747. So like they're designed to protect
from the inside and out.
The inside from
Exploding?
The outside and from the outside from what's on the inside. So they're super robust facilities. And if you look up like modern nuclear reactors, nuclear power plants, you've got the iconic cooling towers that are the thing that everybody sort of sees with the steam coming out of them, and people sort of think that that's like the pollution. I mean, that's just water vapor.
Steam.
It's just steam coming out of the top. There's technically no pollution from nuclear power.
No, that's
one
of the beauties of nuclear power is that it's clean, except for the nuclear part. As long as we can keep that contained, it's clean.
Right, exactly. So anyways, you see those pictures and they're super obvious. They're like big
dome,
half egg sort of things, sunken eggs that are, I mean, like I said, they're designed to take impacts from
anything, basically.
Almost anything that you can. I mean, I'm sure it's possible.
A direct nuclear strike or something would be a problem, but there's already a direct nuclear strike, so is it a problem?
On the inside.
Yeah. There'd just be 2 direct nuclear strikes.
Right. So we talked about it very early on, but the Army continued developing miniaturized reactors like the one on the back of the lorry, the semi-truck, the hauling truck. But they did eventually abandon the concept during the Vietnam War because of financial constraints.
Yeah,
at the time. They have, like you said, they've
restarted it recently.
Started looking at it again, but that is sort of to be determined, I guess.
Yeah.
Finally, cleanup of the site itself. Between 1961 and 62, the majority of the contaminated debris was disassembled and buried on site in the Idaho desert.
Along with the hands and arms of the guys that it got exploded.
Right, correct. They ended up only able to dig a certain depth because of the equipment they had at their disposal, and so the entire exposed equipment that ended up coming from this event is only 8 to 14 feet under under the desert sand of,
which means
Idaho.
don't go walking over there.
Right. It was buried very near to the original site. You know,
Yeah, they didn't transfer it. I mean, everything's like this site is hot.
Right.
Drop it.
Right.
Just drop
just
everything.
a couple dozen feet away from where the original a reactor was located. There were numerous surveys done before 1995 that determined the radiation readings directly above the site were more than double what the background radiation of just environment around us.
Yeah.
So it's not. That's surprisingly low, all things considered, but it is markedly increased.
Yeah,
to
you still don't
double
want to live there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, which is why they do this in the middle of the desert. And
Right.
it's in their property. It's fenced off. No one should be getting that close to the property.
Theoretically. Finally, the EPA did recommend a remedial cap be placed over the burial mounds of the entire site basically was buried, and then debris or just soil and everything was placed on top of it as an insulating layer.
Yeah.
So it was obvious and clear where the location was. I mean, it wasn't like it was a hidden site.
Yeah, they're not. There's just nothing there anymore. Right. I think there's like phone lines that go to nothing now.
Yeah,
There's I've seen photos from like 50 years later,
and there's like driveways, you know, like drive, and they just go into the.
There's just no buildings there anymore.
In 2000, the Idaho National Lab did install an additional
concrete
cap. It wasn't made out of concrete. It was made out of more local materials. So it's they just increased the depth. The
instead of
depth of
digging it lower, they just added more on top, which considering the numbers in the area that seem relatively reasonable compared to what they expected, just adding additional materials on top probably makes a big difference.
Yeah. And so that's it. That's all I've got. That is the SL-1 stationary low power reactor number 1.
Oh, don't forget the word power. Put a put on that power. That's right.
That's gonna fucking be awful. We're probably going to try and get some pop filters next time.
Yeah, I don't have anything else either. It was just a really cool story. I recommend looking up more information on it. We definitely gave it a pretty good once-over, I think, but there's some really cool information out there. There are a bunch of theories. There's there's a suicide theory, and there's a suicide murder due to the affair that they talked about, and then there's just the fact that Legg and Barnes were fighting and wanted to kill each other. There's a sabotage theory out there, which we didn't really get into. That one's really far-fetched.
Yeah.
And then
most of this stuff is
the accidental withdrawal theory, which is we all know is what happened. Right. But do I think that happened due to agitation? I think
certainly could have been a
contributing
contributing factor. Right.
I think the sticking control rods is the main culprit. But if you have an agitated person controlling that, and it seems like he was agitated from multiple directions. Right. He was obviously agitated at work with the other guy he worked with, and he was agitated due to the divorce, and he literally was just talking to his wife on a phone at the facility.
Like we're, hour and a half before he's pulling out this very finicky rod is like...
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer that's what happened. Everything else was, I'm sure, made up. The love triangle, if it happened, it doesn't matter. What matters is he was not in a good state of mind. He shouldn't have been the one doing this, and it shouldn't have been capable of being done anyways.
Right.
You should have had a backup.
There's a lot of layers of what the fuck going on here. Like, number one, design.
Yeah. Failure from the beginning.
Right. It never should have been a facility that could have done
that.
This.
It could have done it. Yeah.
It should not be possible.
Yeah. It should have been shut down. It was 3 years old, and it was designed to last for 3 years. That's another reason.
There's a lot of this oversight issues when it came to passing the blame to people that, I mean, let's be honest, it probably the guy that was being questioned by Congress probably knew a lot more than he was letting on, and just didn't want to be stuck holding the bill.
Yeah.
Which,
which I get, but that's not going to fix things in the long run.
Right. When you just sort of blame it on underlings, it's like, this is a fucked up situation.
Well, nothing's going to get fixed, and now it's a person problem and not an actual facility problem. I mean, on the plus side, it got shut down.
Right.
it's almost one of those things where I don't know that that's a positive that it got shut down. Just think of how far we would be if it didn't get shut down. Now we're starting to look at something like that again. It just really should have been reassessed and be like, if this wasn't a manpower issue, this is a training issue. This is a facility issue.
Well, and we talked about the documentation. They only had a couple pages worth of procedural elements.
And I'm sure a lot of it was more like on-the-job training and less about a procedural manual, but you definitely should have a checklist of boom, 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 boom. This is what will happen. And again, I don't know that they knew exactly what would happen. Mm-hmm. I don't think they thought that it would explode instantly. I don't think anybody thought that. I think they would have been like, oh, fuck, we got to get out of here. We'll report it. We'll have to bring a team in. I don't think they thought it was going to kaboom.
Right. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody at the time or at the facility appreciated
the danger
that they were regularly putting themselves in.
Yeah.
And then same thing with like the fire department, like you mentioned,
they had
how
no idea. They knew that there was a nuclear facility, and but they didn't understand the danger that they were walking into, because they didn't even have material suits to wear to go in. They did have the reader, which literally just was like, it's off the charts. That's all I know. Yeah. And they were like, well, go check it out. And I was like, no, don't fucking go check it out.
Right. Exactly correct.
So, you got anything on there? I don't think there was a ton.
Binary asked us what the measurements were in real units.
Yeah,
so we were talking in kilograms and all that stuff. And it's like, I'm going to blame Keith on that one.
Listen, it said 2.2x by 2.7x by 6m. I don't know. I do know that that's 19.6 feet, cubic feet. That's all I know.
Okay, well, I mean, that's something, I guess.
And then I know that it's 9.1 kilograms, which is 30.6 pounds. But that's not for the entire facility. That was for the crate size.
Right.
And they could carry a certain number of those crates. It didn't tell me how many. But that's what they were trying to package into.
Palletizing it, sort of being able to move it.
They wanted a bunch of boxes that fit into this thing so they could carry this many of those boxes.
And then finally, Artem is asking or saying he's a little late and he was wondering if we could start over.
We can.
From the beginning.
Yeah, not a problem. Hi, I'm Keith. You are... Is it Matthew? This is Dookie Shorts.
Fuck you and
well,
fuck
I'll tell you
Artem.
what, you made it in time for the scale. How's that? Because we're going to wrap things up here. We got to end every one of our sessions with our Dookie Short scale. You guys have all let me down. I've got no new scale options. We need 13
recommendations.
Of them. I have a moist toot, which we might bump because we did get one the other week that had no physicality to it, but we'll get back to that. So we're at a moist toot. Somewhere along the line, we have dad sharding while on a roller coaster, and I think we're pushing that at around 9.
Right, I think
that's what we talked about.
9-ish.
And then
there is
on the top end at 13, because the scale goes 1 to 13, as scales do. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Is a no questions asked call to your best friend for a new pair of pants. Okay, what are you thinking? First off, what are we scaling?
So this one's kind of hard. My thought is we need to judge being the first firefighter that goes in and sees the guy impaled on the roof.
Okay, so
the person that discovers that and is like, what the fuck?
Okay, cool, because I was actually thinking, not exactly, I like that even better. I was thinking from the firefighter's point of view, though, like the first firefighter to get there and be like, what is happening? Yeah. Because the guys that were there didn't have time to have a what the fuck, and they didn't obviously know of the danger.
There's no... It's
but yours is perfect because, like, not only, now the firefighters now know shit's real and we got to get it figured out, but now he walks in, there's a dude fucking attached to the ceiling. All right, I like that. Yeah. Let's do that. Let's do that.
We're placing ourselves in the POV of the firefighter, emergency responder that walks in the door.
He's trying to find a third body.
Everybody, so they've already evacuated the corpse of the first guy and the still alive second guy, the trainee that was on the ground floor. They've managed to evacuate.
Mackenzie never had a chance.
He's poor guy. They've evacuated those, but they know there's a third person in here
somewhere.
And they don't know where he is.
And they've only got 20 seconds to look every time they go in.
And you happen to be...
that guy.
The unlucky gentleman in his firefighter outfit with his helmet on that goes in, and for whatever reason, you're like, what the fuck?
I'm gonna let you go first on this one.
Why?
Because you came up with it.
Fucking.
You must have put time and energy into thought. I need a
didn't.
minute.
This is
I need a fucking minute.
I put time and energy into like
coming up with the idea.
the idea.
You didn't put in time into your notes.
That's factually untrue.
You didn't put any time into your secondary notes of
That's
bringing
accurate.
those back down
That's
to like
accurate.
reasonable size.
I did want to pare them down into speaking.
I think it worked out.
Talking.
I think it worked out.
Yeah.
We'll wait when we hear it and see how terrible it is, and you guys can let us know too. But I thought it went. I thought it was good.
Yeah, I wasn't like
You were
staring
like,
and reading
then
and shaking.
they went into the building, and the building went boom.
Yeah, luckily I was able to.
I mean, you knew the story, so you don't reading line for line.
Right. So I'm gonna go with. The majority of going this high is because you realize the danger you're in suddenly. You've seen what has happened and you realize this is an active radiation environment. Seeing the guy is just one of those shock reinforcements.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with like probably a 10.
Okay.
Because you already, your pucker factor is through the roof.
Just because of the
Just
situation
because
that
of-
you already know you're in.
Right.
Because at this point in time, you've brought bodies out, the military's there, You know
this is a no shit bad thing.
Yep.
And then you're unlucky enough to glance up and be the guy that's like, fuck. Guys,
Yeah.
I'm saying a 10.
Okay. I mean, that makes total sense. I'm going to go with a 5.
Or different.
I would have been like, fucking A! That dude's on the roof. So I'm already freaked out. Like, it's definitely a scary situation. And that, I would be more afraid, like, that would bother me more than the dude on the roof. Dude on the roof would be like, this is fucking awesome now. Because I already know he's dead. Like, I'm walking in like, these two are fucked. I can't even find this body. They're like, maybe he's in 17 pieces.
Maybe vaporized.
So maybe he's gone. So I've been like, look at this shit right here. So I'm going to go with a lower number. I'm going to go with 5.
Okay.
Also, from the research I did, the guy who did see it, it would have been like a 3 or a 4. Like, he was like, you guys aren't going to believe this. Like, that's the kind of response. He's on the roof. He's been impaled. Like, that's how it was reported to the guy that I read the interview on that was in charge of that. He said he just kind of walked out slowly and shaking his head.
He's in the ceiling.
He's like, I found the other guy. He's on the roof. Like, so because of that, and because I think it'd just be like fucking wild.
Right.
And that's just the way my head works, that I'm going to do a 5.
That's interesting.
And the 5 would almost 100% just become because of the nuclear. Like,
right.
And I wouldn't be as worried as I would be right now because they didn't know better. So there's also that factor, especially the firefighters. They were like, I got to go in and get this guy.
Yeah, right.
And they're like, yeah, no, but you shouldn't do that because it's fucking full of radiation. He's like, yeah, cool. I didn't see anything. I saw a dude on the ceiling.
I didn't see any radiation.
I saw no radiation. These
There was
guys
no
aren't
glowing
burnt.
green shit.
They're not glowing green. I didn't see a monster come out of the wall.
Simpsons lied to me.
I know. So yeah, I'm a 5.
Okay.
You're a 10.
I'm sticking with the 10.
No, I could see this is one of those weird ones where it's not like the other ones where like we're seeing a monster in a dark in their home and he's got claws in your face. This is more of there's some separation between you and the thing and how it's going to interfere with you or react to you. But I do like that. I wasn't sure how we were going to do the scale, and I like that. I think that's a good.
Well, this one's going to be
good.
This is the first time that we've had such a large gap between us, so we really need some feedback on this one to see where everybody else is, because it's interesting. Maybe I'm just a little too empathetic, and I can like.
He's dead. That's awesome. Like.
Right, you're going with the fuck. That's cool.
Yeah, like you have to realize, like I'm a horror movie guy. I like do haunted houses. I like that. I'm like that's fucking wild. Like if I knew him and he was a friend of mine or something, it'd be different. I'd be like Bob, or Richard, whatever. John, fucking John, fuck John. Anyways,
that stripper
I'm just
pole
like,
came
this
back
is
to him.
fucking wild. Like there's a dude hanging from the ceiling.
Really?
What?
I said that stripper pole came back around.
It's like a joke grenade. Somebody else jumped on it because I didn't notice it.
Sorry. I apologize to all those listening.
For the cheap shots of the
rest of you, fuck you. I don't know.
I assume we got no emails this week?
Nope.
All right, you guys are failing me miserably. I need emails.
Yeah, I'm going to...
Dookie short scale ideas. I know there's ones of you listening. Binary, if I don't hear something from you, I'll tell you what.
dead to us.
You're going to be dead to me.
You're going to be impaled on the ceiling
please
of a SL-1
make sure you're
reactor.
here in 2 weeks, though.
That's fair. So just to have it out there, it is dookieshortsttv@gmail.com is our email address. I haven't done it yet, but I'll put it in the notes. So like contact us. I don't think I have.
Do it.
I'll make sure that it's in there.
Do it.
And then
We're on Twitter, but I don't think anyone's checked it. Maybe that's where all our shit's at.
that's a good point. It's entirely possible that that's where everybody's talking to us. Our next show is going to be on November 5th. I think we're going to try and stick with the 6:00 p.m.
Yeah, I think we'll shoot
Central
for the
Time.
6 o'clock. I want to throw something else out there. Matthew and I, and we've only discussed this briefly, but I think we're going to take a trip sometime early November and go up to Rhinelander and do a little tour of the Hodags, and we will film it and have a little special episode to send you. It won't be live, but we will be on YouTube.
Yeah, well, so there's a playlist for our shows on YouTube, but we'll do it as sort of an extra.
Yeah, maybe we'll do it. We'll post it on the Saturday between our shows or something.
Right. Yeah,
and we might have a special guest coming with us for that one as well.
Oh, this is news to me. I didn't know this one.
Kurt asked to join us on
That'd
that
be
adventure, so I think
That'd be
that'd
really
be a
cool.
lot of fun. And I was actually lucky enough to go on his podcast. I did it a couple weeks ago, but it went live this week. He is on a podcast called Bad Movies Rule. Very good. Check it out.
Is that what they search on?
Yep.
iTunes or whatever.
If
Bad
you go
Movies
on, if you
Rule?
type in Bad Movies Rule, they're doing well. You're going to find it.
Okay.
It's considered the worst movie podcast of all time.
A little better than us.
I mean, no, it's fantastic. They're really good. Very good production value.
Yeah.
The guys are all funny. They're mostly guys I went to high school with, and they talk about just terrible fucking movies. And I was lucky enough to jump on.
Which
horror.
movie did you
We
review?
did Jason X, which is arguably the top 3 Jason movies in the Friday the 13th franchise, if you ask
How
me.
many
But if
Jason
you're really
movies are
interested in
there?
what I said about it, feel free to jump on there and check it out.
How many Jason movies are there?
Well, 11 if you count Jason versus Freddy. There's 10.
I'm just going to leave this shit alone. This is outside of my wheelhouse of knowledge.
Good idea.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're
We're all
wrapping it
set.
up.
We're going to wrap it up, and I would say, as per usual, we hope that your shorts stay dookie free.
I'm not going to get on board with this.
I'm going to keep saying it.
It's so fucking bad.
Bye, guys.
All right. Bye. See ya.